I'll call to order the Santa Barbara City Council Finance Committee meeting for November 20th. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on any item that is not on our agenda but is within the jurisdiction of the committee? Seeing no one, we will go directly to the one item we have on our agenda, which is the solid waste rates restructuring. Ms. Irely?
Thank you. Again, I'm Renee Irely, and today I'm bringing forward a topic we first started talking about last spring about restructuring the solid waste rates. And we are seeking approval today to move forward with this proposal to bring as part of the rate setting process for fiscal year 2020. It's essential for several reasons. The solid waste system generates approximately $26 million a year, and a predictable, transparent rate structure is needed. As the system has evolved over time, new complexities in services and how to charge for them have led to a complicated billing system and an imbalance in the allocation of costs among customer classes that we're looking to correct. So today I'll go through the goals driving the proposed rate structure, some of the specifics around the current versus the proposed structure changes, and how it impacts customers. So there are four overlying goals driving the rate structure. The first is equity. The proposal upgrades and simplifies the current rate structure for all customer classes, single family, multi-unit, and business. It's intended to ensure that the rates charged to each customer class recover the cost of service attributed to that respective class. Additionally, with a few changes to the classification of customers themselves, the city can increase the consistency of the types of services offered and how they are charged to each customer class by service level and frequency. The second is revenue predictability. The proposed rate structure establishes a system to calculate a base rate for fixed cost in the operating system and includes a variable cost for container size. So this is a first step of several that will be applying consistent costs across all the customers. The third is alignment with state legislation. The current solid waste laws, including AB 341 and AB 1826, categorizes small unit properties, which is 4 units or fewer, as single family, and 5 or greater as multi-unit. So the proposed sector redesign aligns the city with state classifications and increases our ability to demonstrate compliance with it. And the fourth is the integration into the utility billing system. The system is slated for an update, and simplifying the solid waste structure enables charges to be billed without the extensive custom programming as is now required. So this table is a summary of the realignment of the customer classifications and the rate changes. So I'd also like to reiterate, as part of this process in the rate structure, that we'll continue to incentivize recycling across the board for all of the customers. And one of the underlying important pieces of this restructure is that we'll have a per container charges that become consistent. So if you look at the second column, labeled SMR for small residential, the rate restructuring will create a combined sector called this SMR to include both the multi-unit residents with 4 or fewer units and current single-family customers. So small multi-unit residential services tend to be similar to single-family, and merging them into one category also aligns with the current state waste laws, as I mentioned earlier. So this will create a simplified base charge and container charge, generally matching current service, and also offer unlimited recycling and green waste at no additional charge. For the current 5+ multi-unit residents, the new rate simplification system will define them as large residential, that's the third column, again to align with the definitions in state law. As their services are commercial in nature, this also aligns them with the business sector in service offerings and pricing. And while recycling services are not free for the large residential or business, as they are for small residential, they are offered across the board at 50% less than the rate of trash service. And again, this is a restructure as a first step in a series to address the equity and the cost of service issues within and among customer classes. So just to highlight some of the changes by sector that I went through just a minute ago. For the small, multi-unit residents. These will be included with the residential single-family for rate purposes. They will receive essentially free diversion as before, and most of their bills will stay essentially the same. For the large multi-units, the greater than 4 units, as a group, some of them are not paying for all of their overall services. There's some subsidizing that's occurring, so this will help address that. And the pricing of the containers will match the business sector, again, in alignment with the type of service that they're receiving. So we'll be adjusting the base price of the trash container and eliminating the free or no charge first 95-gallon of recycling, which is in the current system, but again, across the board, they will all be able to have a 50% rate for recycling green waste or food waste. So the MURs that are between 5 to 10 units are the ones that are going to see the primary increase in costs. And those vary from about $11 to $28 for the entire complex. I'll go through that a little bit more in a minute. And this is a function of an impact on a percentage basis that's greatest to them, maybe because they're undersubscribed, partly because some of the subsidizing that's happening within that class, and also because of these smaller facilities have a greater proportion of what's now free diversion compared to their overall service that is of a charge. So, for example, if you had 195-gallon of garbage and 195 of recycling, and that recycling is now at no charge, versus a facility that had 3 containers of garbage that they're charging for and 3 containers of recycling, 2 of which are already being charged at the 50% rate. One is now free, but with the new structure, that would be charged 50%. So it's a less overall percentage change for them. And then finally, for the businesses, the majority will be unaffected, or actually will see a small decrease in their rates, about 70% of them. And like the MURs, the impact is mainly to the smaller businesses that are currently receiving diversion services at no charge. So this table is an example of the inconsistency that exists in the current rates for equivalent levels of service. So if you're looking by row, particularly looking between the MUR bill and the business equivalent bill, you can see that for a similar level of service, there's a different price point for them. Additionally, if you read down those columns, if you read down the MUR bill column or the business equivalent bill column, there's not a set percentage or per unit escalation of those prices. And so these are the elements that we're looking to address with the restructure. And then, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, while the proposal will keep the solid waste fund revenue neutral, some customers will see changes in their bills, primarily the smaller multi-unit buildings. And about a third of them will see this change, and we've estimated that to be right around 1,000, and that's about a third of the customer base. And in addition, close to a third of the small businesses, that's around about 150, will see a small increase as well. So if you use the first row as an example, this is for a 5-unit, multi-unit, where a current bill is at about $70 per month. It would be increasing a total of close to $29 and spread across the 5 units in that facility of $578 per unit. As the apartment building gets larger, obviously those the rates that they're being charged are more in alignment with what they're actually receiving, and so the actual change in the future proposed bill is smaller.
Councilmember Dominguez has a question, I think.
Thank you. So the chart on page 8, this comparison, this is the current structure.
That's correct, Councilmember.
And so for the 5 MUR units, the 8646, that's a per unit cost.
That would be a potential. This is escalated based on essentially 35 gallons worth of volume. So this would be a MUR's bill for a level of service for all of those units. So that would be the total for that facility for that month.
So to get the individual unit price,
That you would divide that by
the
5.
Units are
That's
5,
correct.
yeah.
And what is the last number, the 6173, the SFR equivalent bill?
That's an example of what we might see at a larger home, perhaps with a lot of space, maybe more residents there, and that they've required an equivalent sort of level of service. So that's really at the upper range of what a single-family home would see in terms of a monthly bill.
And is that based on how many trash cans they have?
That's based on the amount of trash cans they have.
So that'd be 2?
That could be, that would likely be 2-ish, yeah. Yes.
What? And I'm not.
Or
I'm trying to think
or
what
sort of
you
like a
referenced.
65 sort of like gallon cart.
Well, where did that number come from? Maybe I'll phrase the question that way. What's 6173?
So that would be generated for that individual customer in our billing system, sort of like based on a series of codes applied to that property.
Okay. And then under this, on slide 9, this is the new system?
That's correct. This is an example of what the new would look like.
So the current bill of 6941, that would be for 5 units, so it's really divided by 5.
That's
How
right.
much? So that's much cheaper per unit than the single family residence.
For
Pay $37 for the household, but these 5 households will be paying, what is that, $14 each?
that, thereabouts. That's correct.
And that just reflects because it's still one stop for the truck, even though they're hauling away a larger volume.
So that's part of it. You raised some good questions around the cost of service, and in addition, that with the large residential, they will also now be paying for some portion of their recycling and green waste service. And so, depending on
I thought they
the
weren't
level
paying
of
any recycling or green waste.
currently, so if you're just for the first 95, currently, for the first 95 gallons. But for the proposal across the board, any level of recycling services would be at 50% cost of garbage,
For your second.
even for the
continue.
first one going forward.
Okay, so this goals on page 4, this is where we are currently. This is a summary of current conditions. Or that's the goals. This is
That's
where
the goal. That's where we would like to go. This is the proposed.
Okay, so it's no charge for the first 95 gallons. What is the base charge? That's the $30?
The base charge for residential is $30. That's correct. And in that, so that this is single. So small residential is single family, and then the 4 or less multifamily unit facilities.
So if you live in just a single family unit, your trash bill will be $30 unless you go over the 95 gallons.
Unless you're adding, so so as you're adding on addition 32 gallons, then yes, you would have an additional charge of $5.
Okay. And then the on slide 9, the current bill is $69.41. It goes up to $98.33, so it's a 41% increase, or $28.92, and that's because There's no increase in the base charge. So where does that increase come from? The increase is because the recycling and green waste, now we're charging
We would be charging
50%
those.
for the first?
That's right,
Okay.
yes.
And how much is the recycling for one container under the new structure for a MRR?
I would need to pull that up.
And is that
ask
something that's
Dustin
a
more
fixed thing, or is that going to be based on codes and?
It would, yes.
Dustin Murback, environmental specialist. So the cost of the recycling is going to be tied to the cost of trash, and whatever the cost of trash is, it's going to be half that amount. And so in current MUR, it's going to be something in the neighborhood of $20 for every 32-gallon increment for trash, and about $11 for every increment, 32-gallon increment of recycling.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Irely. Continue.
So just to wrap up here, the important point of this table in front of you is to show the goal in having the simplified system and how it enhances our revenue predictability. And this is an example of using some of the business sector service levels to show out that based on the container price, so anywhere in that first table, in picking the frequency of that price times the number of containers that are subscribed to that service level within the city, that we can quickly and easily generate the amount of revenue predicted from that service level.
This is the simplified version?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Yes. So we do aim for this one. And by comparison, here's a flow chart showing what our current billing system calculation looks like, and why that chart that I just showed you is really quite simple and predictable and transparent. So currently, if you read this flow chart from left to right, the top row is for single-family residential, the middle is the multi-unit residential, the bottom is the business. You can see that our rates are calculated by a system of interdependent steps with bill codes that charge for services differently for each customer within each of those service sectors. As you can imagine, the programming behind this is very complex, and it makes it difficult to change one rate without affecting the others. And the level of predictability is also, and oversight is increased because of that. The decision-making logic within the utility billing system also is slower and more inefficient because of this process, and it adds a lot of time to the generation of bills just on the back end. And then by comparison, if you look at a flow chart, this is, again, what we're aiming for in terms of that transparency and simplicity in this more straightforward calculation using a set per unit price, and it's dependent only on the size of the container, the number of times serviced per week, and based on the type of service, whether that's trash, recycling, green waste, or food scraps. So as you might imagine, our outreach team has been working for several months on an implementation plan and being able to reach out to the impacted customers. As I mentioned, we're looking to make contact with about 1,000 MURs and about 150 businesses. So we have them all identified. And we would work over the spring to do site visits, do waste assessments, help them to adjust their service levels as possible ahead of any changes in rates, and provide additional education on waste reduction as well to try to right-size their services. In addition, we'll do some media and direct mailings to them to give them more information about services available and the potential rate changes coming. And then as part of our Proposition 218 noticing, we will highlight and have a separate section specifically around the rate structure as part of that notification, separate from the standard language and examples that we use for the across-the-board rate increases as well. And so with that, I'd like to thank you for hearing the report and recommend that we be directed to incorporate the proposed new rates into the structure to bring forward this spring as part of the rate setting process. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Arley. Are there any additional questions? Councilmember Dominguez?
So what does the model say in terms of the impact on the total revenue for the sector?
Overall, thank you, Councilmember Dominguez. We will, overall for the enterprise fund, we will stay revenue neutral. What we're looking to do primarily is to start in this first phase to make the adjustments within the sector, the class itself, so that, for example, so that the larger MURs aren't unduly subsidizing the smaller MURs. I think partly like over time, as we look at the rate structure overall, doing additional analysis on among the classifications and how they're balancing out would be an important part of our work.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Just
Mr.
a couple
Smart?
of kind of concluding comments. So this coming July, we have, as you know, we have a consolidated utility bill. So we'll have water, wastewater, and trash within that, and there'll be some increases for that. We know that for trash already, we're going to see some increases because of the implementation of the new rates for the resource recovery project. So we know we're going to see some increases just in terms of that portion of it. Water and wastewater will see the traditional increases as we typically see are in the 5 to 6% range. That's why we wanted to get kind of a sense from you, get a pulse from you as to how you're feeling about these changes, because for a group of 1,000 or so MURs, they're going to see in terms of percentage, even though the dollars may not be significant, but the percentage basis is going to look extreme. And we don't know to what extent these dollar impacts are going to be spread to the actual tenants, because these are really on the complex. The landlord will be paying for this. To what extent they pass it on, we don't know. But if you divide it by the number of units, it's not a big dollar increase, but it's still, a lot of it's perception, and in percentage basis, it's going to look like a significant increase. But just wanted to get your sense of that. We think it's important to do because it's an equity issue, and we really are seeing the small MURs, the ones really in the 5 to 10 unit category, being subsidized by other MURs. They sometimes are undersubscribed, as Ms. Arley said, so they have one trash can of 95 gallons, one 95-gallon diversion or so, and that's free currently, and it just costs more to service them than what they're paying for. So this is to true all that up and do some alignments with state law. But there will be some that are going to be impacted. Ms. Arley indicated that we're going to do a lot of outreach. We do a lot of that. We're good at that. And so we'll do whatever we can. In most cases, they have opportunities to offset those impacts by doing some more adjustments to the trash container, maybe downsizing some in favor of more recycling containers and right-sizing that side of the equation. But just wanted to make sure you're aware of this. And then if you're okay, we weren't planning on going to council with this. We were just going to look to you. And then they'll know once we get the noticing out and we do our normal budget presentations. We'll talk more about that with council, but we're going to be looking to do noticing sometime in February in accordance with Prop 218, and then have, of course, our hearing in June, as we always do each year. So that's where we're at. Looking for some feedback and direction.
Thank you for that additional summary. Appreciate that. Councilmember Dominguez?
So, and just focusing on like the 5-unit MUR, because that has the bigger percentage difference, so that 9833. So that looks like you could have 3 32-gallon trash cans for $60, and then 5 green waste and or recycling for another $55. Is that kind of, or I guess maybe 4, 44, and 60 to get you to the $100 range? I'm just trying to see how you came up with the 9833 given the new numbers.
That's actually quite possible of a scenario for that one.
So will 3 32-gallon trash bins cut it for 5 units? Is that pretty?
You ask also a good question, Councilmember Dominguez. That's part of, I think, some of our overall assessment about adequate service levels, particularly for some of the smaller MURs. And one of the other opportunities in doing this work and the restructuring is to have more staff out in the field and making those assessments and helping them make those adjustments if necessary.
95 gallons of trash may not be enough. It could be if they have an appropriate number of diversion containers. I have a family of 3, and we have 32 gallons of trash. So theoretically, it's possible, but we're also concerned that maybe there should be, they're just undersubscribed in trash. And, so where is that excess going?
And so then a 4-unit MUR, they're going to be paying the base charge of $30
Yes, that's correct.
for unit or for the full complex?
That would be for the full complex, and then that variable rate on any additional 32-gallon equivalent of service that they needed
For trash.
for trash.
So they'd get a 95 trash, a 95 recycling, and a 95 green waste for the $30?
Thereabouts. No, well, that's actually based on the 32, on the 35. I'm sorry. I'm going to let Dustin refer to that.
Dustin Murbeck, Environmental Specialist. The way that the base charge works as is presented there is exclusively to what will be the small residential, which is 4 units or less, including all current single-family residential. Current single-family residential has a trash package system at present that we are essentially splitting apart into the base charge, which just covers the included recycling and green waste service, as well as the additional services, bulky item pickups, that sort of thing. And then the $5 will be for every 32-gallon increment of trash, including the first one.
And what's the base charge for that package?
So the total charge for the lowest package under the new proposed system would be about $35.
35 or 30? In the report it says 30. And that's because there's a mandatory $5,
Yes.
30.
So in the
32.
report there on that, if you're referring to that table, it's $30 for the base. The base does not include any service. And then it's $5 for every increment of trash above that.
So for
including the first one.
35, you get a 32-gallon trash can?
You get a 32-gallon trash can and as much recycling and green waste as you need
Okay.
included.
And that's true if it's a 1-unit single-family home or a 3 or 4-unit apartment building?
Yes, but not 5 units. And then at 5 units or above, you're paying for every container that you have.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Do we have anyone in the audience who'd like to speak? Ms. Reason?
Hi, I'm Bonnie Reason. Refreshed my memory. Were there not a lot of propositions?
Ms. Reason, would you please push the button to get that green light on? Thank you.
Thank you. Were there not a lot of propositions on the recent ballot? I mean, it seems to me, will the public recognize what they have approved as, are you going to explain it to them with your noticing and your billing? It seems,
There's going to be a additional outreach to the customers who are affected specifically by
Right.
the increase in price. Somebody will come out to the property and talk through the trash collection system that they have in place now and what the changes would mean.
Yeah.
In addition to that, there's going to be mail and media information out to
Oh,
the general
okay.
public who aren't affected but are actually going to benefit by lower rates.
Yeah.
And then we're going to have a Prop 218 hearing too in the spring of next year to, in the regular council session, go through all this again. And then the
Okay.
council will adopt the rates as part of the budget. So there's going to be a long, transparent public process.
I appreciate that because the ballot was very confusing, and I think that for probably a lot of people, the language of some of the propositions was obtuse. So I appreciate your explanation and your willingness to make sure the public is educated as well as renters. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for the question. Councilmember Dominguez.
And I guess just further clarification on that point. So single-family residences or duplexes, the tenant won't actually receive any information if they're not getting the bill. If the landlord is getting the bill, the tenant won't really know. But that's kind of balanced out by the fact that it says most bills will stay essentially the same, and the landlord may not want to respond in any case.
Yes, that's correct. The way that the noticing works, it does go to the landlord. But yes, for the single family and largely for the small MURs, there won't be much of a change for them, if any change. So it's a bit of a wash for them.
And I only point that out because about 2/3 of our city are renters, so they're not going to be aware of it. And to the extent most of it's below the surface or their bills won't change, it's probably fine. Will there be something like in the city newsletter or other public outreach that maybe have a link to a page that describe this for people who are curious, even if they may not notice a difference?
So we do typically include information in the city's outreach and on our webpage, and certainly as part of the outreach that we're doing to the affected complexes, we can make efforts to make sure that the tenants are notified as well, along with the property owners.
Great, thank you.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, would you mind making a motion?
So you're saying that we don't need to refer this to the city council. When would this be brought to the city council? Will this come up in budget next year?
Yes, it'll be brought back when we do our finance presentation of the solid waste fund. We'll talk about it then. The notices will go out, as Mr. Hart indicated, and then we'll have a Prop 218 hearing in early June before the rates are adopted.
Okay. So I would move that we incorporate the proposed new rate structure into the annual rate setting and the notification process for fiscal year 2020.
Thank you for the motion. I'll second it. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed and abstain. The matter carries unanimously, and that's our only item on the agenda, so we are adjourned.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.